Most people believe aging is something that simply happens with time, like rust forming on metal, year after year, unavoidable and indifferent to how you live. But there's a quieter truth hiding in plain sight, one that blood tests rarely catch, and doctors don't usually explain. Many Australians are eating regularly, exercising reasonably, and doing what they're told is healthy. Yet they still feel heavier, slower, foggier, and more exhausted than they did a decade ago. Not sick enough to raise alarms, but not well enough to feel right. What if the problem isn't what you're eating, but the fact that your body never gets a break from processing food at all? What if aging isn't driven mainly by years passing, but by constant metabolic noise, day after day, meal after meal, snack after snack, without ever allowing the system to go quiet long enough to repair itself? This is uncomfortable to hear because we've been taught that eating often is safety, that skipping meals is dangerous, that hunger is something to suppress immediately. But biology didn't evolve in supermarkets or office kitchens. It evolved in cycles of eating and absence, work and rest, fuel and repair. And when those cycles disappear, the body doesn't collapse overnight. It slowly wears down in ways that feel normal, until one day they don't. That afternoon crash after lunch, the stubborn belly fat that appears even without overeating, the sleep that never quite restores you, the mental fatigue that no holiday seems to fix. These aren't random signs of getting older. They're signals, quiet ones, and most people miss them until the damage is already well underway. In this video, we're not talking about extreme fasting, willpower, or chasing weight loss. We're talking about how long-term metabolic overload quietly accelerates aging, and why giving your body strategic periods of silence may be one of the most overlooked tools for preserving energy, clarity, and resilience as you get older. This isn't about eating less to punish the body. It's about understanding why, sometimes, doing less allows the body to do more. If any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, that's not coincidence. It's because the body gives warnings long before it gives diagnoses. And those warnings don't arrive as pain or illness. They arrive as small losses you're told to ignore. Less energy, slower recovery. A mind that feels busy but dull at the same time. None of it dramatic enough to demand action, yet persistent enough to reshape how you feel about your own body. To understand why this happens, we need to step away from diet rules and look at something deeper. How the human body actually manages energy over time. Not in a lab, not in theory, but in the way it was designed to survive. Every time you eat, your body switches into processing mode. Blood sugar rises. Insulin follows. Cells focus on absorbing, storing, and using incoming fuel. This is not harmful. It's essential. The problem begins when this state never truly ends. When meals blend into snacks, snacks into drinks, and drinks into late-night calories, the body remains locked in a constant state of intake, with no clear signal that it's safe to stop, assess, and repair. In this environment, the body behaves logically. It prioritizes growth and storage, because that's what energy abundance has always meant in evolutionary terms. What it quietly postpones is maintenance, internal cleanup, cellular repair, the invisible work that keeps tissues flexible, mitochondria efficient, and inflammation under control. Not because the body is failing, but because it's following instructions you never realized you were giving it. This is where most conversations about aging go wrong. Aging isn't just the accumulation of birthdays. It's the accumulation of unresolved metabolic signals. When energy is always available, the systems responsible for long-term maintenance are constantly interrupted before they can do their job. And here's the part almost no one explains clearly. The body does not activate repair while it's busy processing fuel. Repair requires a different state entirely, one that only appears when insulin drops, energy input pauses, and the system finally recognizes a window of metabolic quiet. That quiet is not weakness. It's not starvation, it's a biological switch. And once you understand what flips during that switch, the way you think about aging, fatigue, and even hunger itself starts to change. To see what's really happening, we need to zoom in past habits and calories, past food labels and meal timing, and look at the level where aging actually accelerates or slows down. Inside your cells, every cell in your body runs on energy. But energy doesn't just fuel movement. It sends instructions. When food arrives, especially carbohydrate-rich food, insulin rises and tells cells one thing very clearly. Resources are available. It's time to grow, store, and build. This message is not bad. It's how you heal wounds, maintain muscle, and survive periods of demand. The issue begins when this signal never truly turns off. In modern life, insulin rarely returns to baseline for long. Breakfast blends into coffee with milk, then a snack, then lunch, then something small in the afternoon, then dinner, then a drink or dessert at night. None of these moments feel extreme, but biologically, they create a continuous signal of abundance. And abundance, at the cellular level, always prioritizes expansion over inspection. Cells under constant energy input behave like a city under permanent construction. New structures go up. Old ones are left standing whether they're stable or not. Over time, damaged proteins accumulate. Faulty components aren't recycled efficiently. Inflammation rises quietly in the background. Not enough to make you sick, but enough to slowly stiffen tissues, dull metabolic flexibility, and increase biological wear. This is where aging quietly speeds up. Your mitochondria, the structures responsible for turning fuel into usable energy, are especially sensitive to this environment. They evolved for rhythm, periods of fuel followed by periods of recovery. When fuel arrives without pause, mitochondria are forced to operate continuously at high throughput. That creates excess metabolic byproducts, not as a failure, but as a byproduct of overload. Over time, efficiency drops. Energy output becomes unstable. You feel this as fatigue that doesn't match your activity, and mental fog that doesn't lift with rest. The critical point is this: none of this triggers alarms early on. Blood tests can look normal. Weight may stay stable. From the outside, everything appears fine, but internally, the system is operating without maintenance windows. And biology never designed itself to run that way indefinitely. So when does repair happen? Repair begins only when the incoming energy signal fades long enough for cells to receive a different instruction. Not growth, not storage, but evaluation. This shift requires insulin to fall and nutrient signaling to quiet down. Only then do cells activate internal processes that identify damaged components and dismantle them carefully, making space for renewal. This is not a dramatic switch. It doesn't feel heroic. It often feels uncomfortable at first, because the body is not used to silence anymore. When people first reduce feeding windows, they often interpret discomfort as harm, headaches, irritability, low energy. But these sensations are not signs that the body is breaking down. They are signs that the nervous system and metabolism are recalibrating away from constant glucose dependence. The system is changing gears. What matters is not pushing through discomfort blindly, but understanding what it represents. The body is not panicking. It's adjusting priorities. And once that adjustment completes, something subtle changes. Energy becomes steadier instead of spiking and crashing. Hunger becomes clearer instead of compulsive. Sleep deepens because nighttime is no longer filled with metabolic activity that conflicts with repair hormones. The body begins to operate with contrast again. Input, then silence, then restoration. When energy input finally quiets, the body doesn't relax, it reorganizes. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They imagine fasting as the body slowing down, conserving, becoming fragile. In reality, the opposite happens internally. When nutrient signals drop low enough and stay low long enough, cells switch from expansion mode into inspection mode. Growth pauses, and something far more selective begins. This process is called autophagy. The word sounds extreme, but what it describes is careful housekeeping, not destruction. Cells begin scanning themselves for components that no longer function properly, proteins that are misfolded, structures that were damaged under oxidative stress, mitochondria that produce more waste than energy. None of these are removed randomly. They're identified, tagged, and dismantled with precision. Think of it like quality control in a system that's been running without shutdowns for years. While food is constantly arriving, there's no opportunity to stop the line and check for faults. Autophagy is that shutdown. Brief, purposeful, and essential. During constant eating, this system stays largely suppressed. Not because the body forgets how to clean itself, but because incoming fuel keeps telling cells that expansion is more urgent than maintenance. When that signal finally fades, the balance shifts. Lysosomes, specialized recycling units inside cells, become active. They break down damaged material and reuse what can still serve a purpose. Waste is reduced. Internal clutter clears. Inflammation pressure eases. This cleanup doesn't feel dramatic from the outside. There's no instant burst of energy or sudden clarity at first. In fact, many people feel worse before they feel better, and that's where fear creeps in. Early fasting discomfort often appears precisely because this cleanup has started. The brain, long adapted to constant glucose availability, resists the change. It signals hunger loudly. It amplifies discomfort. This is not because damage is occurring, but because dependency is being challenged. Neural circuits recalibrate before they stabilize. As fat stores begin converting into ketones, the body gains access to an alternative fuel source. One of these ketones, beta-hydroxybutyrate, does more than provide energy. It acts as a signal, a message that says the environment is controlled, not chaotic. That signal dampens unnecessary inflammation and supports cellular resilience across multiple tissues, including the brain. This is why clarity often arrives after the hardest phase, not before it. Biology tests stability before it rewards efficiency. Importantly, autophagy is not a permanent state. It's a cycle. It turns on during metabolic quiet and turns down again when feeding resumes. That rhythm is the point. Without it, damaged components accumulate silently. With it, the system renews itself gradually, without force. And this is where one of the biggest myths collapses. The idea that pausing food automatically leads to muscle loss and weakness. During fasting, the body raises protective signals, including growth hormone, to preserve essential tissue while cleanup occurs. The system is not careless. It is conservative. It protects structure while it repairs function. What ages us fastest is not temporary absence of food. It's the absence of cleanup. Once cellular cleanup begins, the body doesn't leave appetite and energy to chance. It brings hormones back into order. Most people think hormones are cravings or moods. They're not. Hormones are timing signals. They decide when to build, when to store, when to repair, and when to rest. When eating happens constantly, those signals overlap and blur. The body receives too many instructions at once, and none of them land clearly. Intermittent fasting restores contrast, and contrast is what hormones need to function properly. Let's start with hunger. Ghrelin is often called the hunger hormone, but that label is misleading. Ghrelin doesn't rise endlessly when you don't eat. It rises in anticipation of eating patterns you've trained into your body. That's why hunger often shows up at the same times each day, regardless of how much energy you actually need. When eating windows become consistent and meals are no longer scattered, ghrelin secretion becomes rhythmic instead of chaotic. Hunger shifts from constant noise into predictable information. Many people are surprised to discover they feel less obsessed with food, not more. Next is leptin, the hormone responsible for satiety. Leptin tells your brain that energy stores are sufficient and eating can stop. Under constant eating and insulin exposure, leptin sensitivity dulls. The signal is there, but the brain stops listening. This is why people can eat enough and still feel unsatisfied. Periods of metabolic quiet help restore leptin sensitivity. The signal becomes audible again. Fullness feels real, not forced. Now to the hormone most people misunderstand during fasting. Human growth hormone. or HGH. HGH is not a muscle-building steroid. Its primary role is preservation. During fasting, as insulin drops, HGH rises naturally to protect muscle tissue, bone density, and structural integrity while the body shifts into repair mode. This rise is not aggressive, it's compensatory. It ensures that cleanup happens without unnecessary breakdown. This is why many people maintain strength even when caloric intake decreases, and why fasting does not automatically lead to muscle loss when done sensibly. Together, these hormonal shifts create something rare in modern life: metabolic clarity. Energy becomes steadier instead of spiking and crashing. Hunger becomes quieter and more respectful. Sleep improves because nighttime is no longer crowded with insulin and digestive signaling that competes with melatonin and recovery hormones. The body stops reacting and starts coordinating. This is the deeper benefit most people don't expect. Not weight loss, not discipline, but relief. Relief from constant internal negotiation around food and energy. And this is also where caution matters. These hormonal adaptations depend on context. If stress hormones like cortisol are already elevated, adding fasting without recovery can confuse the system. Biology doesn't reward pressure. It rewards alignment. When fasting supports repair, hormones stabilize. When it stacks on top of chronic stress, the body interprets it as threat instead of rest. Sleep is where repair is meant to finish. But for many people, it never gets the chance. Most adults assume poor sleep comes from stress, screens, or getting older. Those factors matter, but they miss a deeper issue that quietly disrupts recovery every night. The body is still metabolically active when it should be shutting down. The circadian system is not just a sleep clock. It's a timing network that coordinates hormones, temperature, digestion, immune activity, and cellular repair across a 24-hour cycle. For this system to work, night needs to feel biologically different from day. Darkness alone is not enough. Late eating blurs that contrast. When food arrives in the evening, insulin rises at a time when the brain expects metabolic quiet. Cortisol, melatonin, and insulin begin competing for control of the same window. The result isn't always difficulty falling asleep. Often, it's fragmented sleep, light sleep, early waking, a feeling of having slept but not recovered. This matters because many of the processes that slow aging are scheduled for the night. Autophagy intensifies during deep sleep. Growth hormone pulses are released when insulin is low and the body is at rest. The brain clears metabolic waste accumulated during the day through fluid exchange systems that activate most efficiently during deep, uninterrupted sleep. When digestion and glucose processing continue late into the night, these processes are delayed or weakened. Intermittent fasting restores nighttime silence. When eating windows close earlier and remain closed, insulin drops as evening approaches. Melatonin rises without interference. Cortisol follows a clearer decline. Body temperature drops as it should. The internal environment shifts from activity to restoration without confusion. Many people notice this change before anything else. They fall asleep faster. They wake less often. They wake up feeling clearer, even before weight or energy changes appear during the day. This is not placebo. It's timing. The body doesn't need more effort to repair itself. It needs fewer interruptions. Circadian alignment also influences appetite the following day. Better sleep improves leptin sensitivity and reduces stress-driven hunger. The system begins to reinforce itself. Rest improves regulation. Regulation improves rest. Aging slows not because time stops, but because repair finally has a stable window to operate. This is why sleep quality is one of the most honest indicators of whether fasting is helping or harming. When fasting is aligned with circadian biology, sleep improves. When it isn't, sleep degrades. The body always reports truthfully through sleep. At this point, it's important to slow down and correct a common misunderstanding. Intermittent fasting is powerful, but it is not universally gentle. Biology doesn't reward intensity. It rewards appropriateness. The same fasting window that restores one person's metabolism can quietly overwhelm another's if the context is wrong. This difference has nothing to do with discipline or willpower. It comes down to baseline stress, hormonal resilience, and how much margin the body has to adapt. One hormone sits at the center of this distinction: cortisol. Cortisol is not a villain. It's the body's primary stress coordinator. It mobilizes energy, maintains blood pressure, and keeps you alert when needed. But when cortisol is already elevated from chronic psychological stress, poor sleep, or overtraining, adding fasting can amplify strain instead of relief. In that state, the body doesn't interpret food absence as a safe maintenance window. It interprets it as another threat. Repair is postponed. Breakdown accelerates. This is why some people feel calmer and clearer with fasting, while others become wired, anxious, or exhausted. The signal is different because the starting point is different. Health history matters as well. People with chronic kidney disease need to be cautious because fasting alters fluid and electrolyte handling. Sodium, potassium, and magnesium balance can shift. Healthy kidneys adapt smoothly. Vulnerable ones may accumulate silent stress long before symptoms appear. This is why nephrology guidelines emphasize supervision rather than experimentation. Those predisposed to gout or elevated uric acid face a different issue. Early fasting increases ketone production, and ketones share excretion pathways with uric acid. In susceptible individuals, this can temporarily raise uric acid levels and trigger painful flares. This doesn't mean fasting is impossible, but it does mean progression must be slow and deliberate. Women of reproductive age represent another category requiring nuance. Aggressive or prolonged fasting can disrupt hypothalamic signaling that regulates reproductive hormones. This is not a failure. It's protective biology. The body reduces fertility signals when it perceives energy uncertainty. For some women, gentler fasting rhythms support health. For others, pushing too far creates imbalance rather than repair. Cardiac rhythm sensitivity is another consideration often overlooked in online fasting discussions. Electrolyte shifts, especially during adaptation phases, can influence heart rhythm in susceptible individuals. Awareness and monitoring matter. The most important takeaway is this: fasting should reduce noise, not add stress. Progress is not measured by how long you endure hunger. It's measured by whether sleep improves, energy steadies, appetite calms, and recovery becomes easier over time. When those signals move in the wrong direction, the body is not asking for more discipline. It's asking for adjustment. This is why personalization matters more than protocols. Shorter fasting windows done consistently can be more beneficial than longer ones forced intermittently. Alignment beats intensity. Aging is often presented as something that simply happens to you. A slow, inevitable slide that begins somewhere in midlife and accelerates no matter what you do. But biology tells a more precise story. Aging is not just the passage of time. It's the accumulation of signals. Signals about safety, about abundance, about whether the body should prioritize growth or maintenance. In modern life, those signals are rarely balanced. Energy arrives constantly. Stress rarely fully resolves, and repair is postponed not because the body can't do it, but because it's never given the space. Intermittent fasting doesn't promise youth. It doesn't reverse time. What it does is remove interference. It lowers metabolic noise so that systems designed for repair can finally be heard. When that happens, resilience quietly replaces exhaustion. Clarity returns before confidence. Stability shows up before visible change. This is why weight loss is often a side effect, not the goal. The deeper shift happens internally. Hormones regain rhythm, sleep deepens, hunger becomes information rather than distraction, energy steadies. The body stops negotiating with itself all day. Importantly, this is not about pushing harder or enduring discomfort for its own sake. It's about respecting timing, about recognizing that repair requires silence just as much as effort requires fuel. Too much input, even when it's well-intentioned, keeps the system locked in survival mode. The future of healthy aging won't be built on extreme protocols or rigid rules. It will belong to people who learn to read their own biological feedback, who notice when sleep improves, when appetite calms, when recovery feels easier. Those signals are not vague. They are the body's language. Your body already knows how to maintain itself. It did not forget. It was simply interrupted. By restoring periods of metabolic quiet, you're not forcing change. You're allowing intelligence that has always been there to operate again. Aging doesn't stop, but its speed, its texture, and its impact on how you live remain negotiable, not through punishment, through timing, through restraint, through understanding when less allows more.